This lecture discusses occupational training learning credit. It also explains the supporting documentation required to validate a request for credit based on occupational training. Before we begin, let's review information about your work specialization. The information on the next few slides should look familiar to you. We discussed this during the ELFH 300 introduction lecture at the beginning of the semester. What counts for credit in the specialization area? The work specialization section of your bachelor's program evaluates learning in a work specialization or teachable occupation. Learning may be from actual college courses or from work-related courses and experience. The important factor is that the learning is both credit-worthy and college level, meaning that the level of learning is similar to a college-level course. ELFH 290 and ELFH 390 course numbers are used for courses that may not have been accepted by U of L or were taken through a non-academic organization. This includes formal training programs in organizations such as military and corporate, courses from non-accredited career schools, and no-rule courses on your transfer evaluation. Courses can be verified by work training transcripts or other documents. This is occupational training learning credit. ELFH 291 and ELFH 391 course numbers are used for learning you received via a supervisor or through self-study. This is learning that might result in licenses or certifications issued by professional and government agencies. This is the most difficult to verify and requires documents such as performance evaluations and supervisor letters. This is occupational experiential learning credit. The Prior Learning Assessment Documents, or PLAD, represents your request for 6 to 48 hours of work specialization credit based on learning from occupational training or experiences. Each student must have a PLAD, and each student must have between 6 and 48 hours of work specialization credit. These hours can come from any combination of the two types we'll discuss in this class. In this lesson, we'll discuss occupational training learning credit. The University of Louisville requires 123 credit hours to earn a bachelor's degree. 50, or 50 of those hours must be at the upper level, that is 300 and 400 level, and 30 of the last 36 must be at U of L. However, this doesn't apply if you don't live in the Louisville area, so be sure to ask the program advisor if you have any questions. The ELFH major courses total 35 upper level credits. The general education requirement consists of 34 lower level credits in specified areas. Prior learning assessment is the way to obtain up to 48 hours of credit in the work specialization. By doing a little math, you can see that it takes 15 credits of upper level and 33 lower level to achieve the total. That leaves 6 credit hours to earn in the elective category. Your work specialization is the area of expertise that you've developed over your years in the workforce. In most cases, it's the area in which you hope to teach, train, coach, mentor, manage, or lead after graduation. Over the past few weeks, we explored ONET Online to help determine the knowledge, skills, and abilities, or KSAs, that comprise your work specialization. Then we completed the hallmark assessment for this course, the KSA Inventory and Life Learning Narrative. This detailed your development of your work specialization, and it set the baseline for your request of 6 to 48 hours of work specialization credit. As we said earlier, each student in this program must have between 6 and 48 hours of work specialization credit as part of his or her graduation requirements. These hours can come from any combination of the two types we'll discuss in class. In this lesson, we'll talk in detail about occupational training learning credit. In the coming lesson, we'll talk about occupational experiential learning credit. Occupational training credit comes from courses taken through non-accredited institutions, courses not accepted for transfer credit by U of L, or courses taken through your employer. This includes military training. These courses must be related to your work specialization. The supporting documentation you'll need to support this request of credit includes the Occupational Training Learning Worksheet, accompanying justification essays, proof of participation in the training event, and a credit recommendation for the training. Let's step back a minute and talk about credit policies. We're asking the university to grant additional credit based on learning from occupational training or experiences. So it's important to know about the policies associated with this type of credit. When it comes to validating and evaluating prior work learning for college credit, you should know that these policies are derived from publications from the Council on Adult and Experiential Learning. First, it's recognized that college-level learning occurs outside the college setting. Therefore, credit may be earned for documented learning from experience, but it's not given on the basis of experience alone. The college credit awarded in this program for the work specialization credit can be no more than 48 hours. Learning is documented through the PLAD, which includes specific forms, structured essays, appropriate documentation, and any other material requested by the PLA Review Committee. Students should be aware that such credits will probably not transfer to other institutions. Not all institutions recognize prior learning credit, and they might not transfer this type of credit to their school. There are different ways to understand the assessment of prior learning and the portfolio development process. This course provides the guidelines accepted by U of L. In other words, if you choose to leave U of L before graduation, another institution will likely not accept the credits awarded to you through the PLAD. So now let's talk about some sources of occupational training learning credit. You may have taken a course at an accredited institution that wasn't accepted for transfer credit by U of L. These will be listed as no rule on the right side of the student transfer evaluation under internal equivalency. These courses are eligible for occupational training learning credit, so long as they're related to your work specialization. Non-accredited school programs, such as technical trade schools, may be counted if they support your work specialization. Additionally, military courses or courses taken through your employer are excellent sources of occupational training learning credit. Now let's talk about the type of supporting documentation you'll need for your request. First, you'll use the Occupational Training Learning Worksheet to list the courses you'd like considered as occupational training learning credit. Then, your PLAD will include a justification essay for each entry on the worksheet. For this lesson, you'll submit just one of these justification essays to your instructor for review. However, remember that your PLAD will include one essay for each entry on the worksheet. You'll also need to include proof of your work training. This could be a certificate of attendance, a transcript, or a letter from your HR department or supervisor. Finally, you'll need to include validation of the amount of credit requested. Don't worry, we'll talk about each of these pieces of documentation in the coming slides. Download the Occupational Training Learning Worksheet from the Lecture and Handouts section. Begin by entering your name, student ID, and the current date at the top of the form. In the far left column, labeled Training Course Title and Supervisor, list the name of the course you completed and the host institution. In this example, Mary completed the Advanced Management course at McDonald's Corporation and the Management Development Certificate through U of L's Delphi Center for Teaching and Learning. The Dates Hours column lists the dates of the training and the total number of clock hours or days. In the column labeled Supporting Documents, list which documents will validate your request. Mary is using a certificate of completion and the ACE guide to validate her request of 1 lower level credit hour for McDonald's management course. She's using a certificate of completion and the ELFH 290-390 syllabus to validate her request of 3 upper level credit hours for her management development certificate. Remember that you must have documentation of your completion of the training as well as validation of the credit request. Finally, in the far right column, include the credit request, both the number of hours and the level of the request. Total your request on the bottom line. If additional rows are needed, simply add them to the form. Now, download the Occupational Training Learning Justification Essay template from the Lecture and Handout section of Blackboard. At the top of the form, ensure that the information exactly matches that which is listed on your Occupational Training Learning worksheet. Include a description of the training. This can come directly from the ACE guide, or it could be a course description offered by the host institution. Finally, justify your request with an explanation of the course's relation to your work specialization. This justification does not need to be lengthy. However, it should accurately detail the relationship of the course to your work specialization. Now let's discuss the supporting documentation that is required for your request of Occupational Training Learning credit. First, you'll need to include proof that you completed the training. This could be a certificate or a transcript, or even a letter from your HR department or your supervisor. The documentation does not need to be lengthy. However, it should include your name, the type of training completed, and the number of training hours included. If you use a letter from your HR department or supervisor as your supporting documentation, it must be written on official letterhead, and it must include a signature as well as contact information for the author of the letter. Additionally, you'll need validation of your credit request. In many cases, we can use the ACE guide as support. The ACE guides are available on the internet and contain credit recommendation for formal courses and occupations offered by the armed services and the civilian workforce. See the lesson plan for web links to the ACE National Guide to College Credit for Workforce Training and the ACE Guide to Education Experiences in the Armed Services. If you're using no rule classes from your student transfer evaluation as Occupational Training Learning credit, the transcript from the host institution will offer both proof of completion of the training and validation of the credit request. Pay close attention to courses taken through the quarter-hour system rather than the semester-hour system. These aren't a 1-for-1 ratio. If you're unable to find your particular course in the ACE guide and you don't have a host institution's credit recommendation, we can use the syllabus for ELFH 290-390 as our guide. This syllabus states that 15 hours of occupational training is equal to 1 college credit. The level of credit is determined by the job zone listed in ONET. Job zones 1 through 3 are eligible for lower level credit. Job zones 4 and 5 are eligible for upper level credit. Regardless of the source of your credit recommendation, the ACE guide, the host institution, or the syllabus, Pay close attention to the minimum and maximum number of credit hours granted through occupational training learning credit. These are also listed in the syllabus for ELFH 290-390. Lower level credit, or ELFH 290, can be granted at a minimum of 2 credit hours and a maximum of 42. Upper level credit, or ELFH 390, can be granted at a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 18 credit hours. At this point, you should be fairly familiar with occupational training learning credit and the types of documentation needed for its request. Occupational training learning credit comes from courses taken at accredited institutions but not accepted for transfer credit by U of L, courses taken at unaccredited institutions, or courses taken through your employer. Your request must be supported by proof of your training and a validation of the amount of credit requested. You'll list the sources of your request on the Occupational Training Learning worksheet and complete a justification essay for each entry on the worksheet. As a reminder, if you won't be requesting any of this type of credit, simply submit these assignments as not applicable. Don't worry, you'll still earn credit for these assignments.